Joe Downs joins me here today. You can learn what his team is up to. Head over to bellrosegrp.com. I'm going to have that as a clickable link in the show notes to help you out on that. But really appreciate your time, Joe. We're going to be talking about all things storage units here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, Jack.
So, Joe, it seems like real estate investing in every way, shape, or form is more times than not a accidental occupation. How did you find your way?
Mine was not accidental. I specifically had been trying to get into real estate to break my way in, which sounds so funny to say, for someone like you or me today, looking back on it, because, it's like, well, why did you think it was that hard to break into real estate? I don't know. I guess when you don't know what you don't know, it seems insurmountable, I guess, right? But it took me years of being preoccupied with other things, but I always had that on my mind as this is where I wanted to be. And so it wasn't an accident. It was more of a goal. It was a desire. I was just trying to find the right opportunity, which, as I'm saying that out loud, I'm just ashamed of myself that it took that long. But because I didn't need to find the right opportunity, I could have created it on my own had we had podcasts like yours to listen to back in the day. So I'll give myself a little cover. We didn't have podcasts like this where I could just log on or download and listen to, I'm sure some of the many guests that you've had on and describe the various ways you can get involved in real estate, whether it's residential or retail or storage or commercial. So yeah, mine was, it was in the back of my head. I actually started out as a financial advisor and I did that for years. And then after 9/11, that was just kind of like it was a moment for me where I just kind of looked in the mirror and said, what are you doing? You don't even like this business. And so I went out to reinvent, and it's part of my life history. So I'll just share it. I bought a bar in between, a bar and restaurant. The bar part's fun. The restaurant part's a nightmare. And, it didn't go well, put it that way. So I was reinventing again. I took a job selling radio. It was there. You never know with doors, right? When one door closes, another one opens. You just never know if you keep your mind open. One of my clients was a conservative talk radio station in Philadelphia. And one of my clients was actually a real estate mentorship group teaching people how to buy and rehab and either flip or rent residential real estate. And so it just so happened they became my client. So now it's this was my entree into learning real estate. And so I started doing that. I guess I've always been an entrepreneur. So I was still working radio, selling radio. I was still bartending, by the way, on Thursdays and Saturday nights back in my youth. This is 20 years ago. And then I was out on the weekends, getting up early, Saturday, Sunday mornings, pounding the streets of Philadelphia, going in and out of row homes. And I think I started wholesaling because I didn't have any money. I was broke. And so I started wholesaling and then got a partner and we started flipping and renting. Another client came along who I had a relationship with behind the scenes, but not with the contact I had. And I developed a relationship with him, and he had a friend in commercial real estate who was in the 1031 exchange syndication business, and they needed a sales guy, commercial real estate or 1031 exchanges for that matter. But I didn't want to sell radio much longer. So I took that job and I ended up raising a lot of money, learning that aspect of it, raised a lot of money for multifamily, for office, some hotels. And between that, the residential and then the commercial experience I had, I was in real estate. I kind of just, my goal was to get into real estate and that was achieved. And from there, it's, everything goes through cycles, as you know, and it's been a series of reinventing and reinventing inside of real estate. And that's how I ended up in storage. It's just one reinvention after another.
Right. You mentioned that you were a financial advisor.
Yep.
I'm always surprised, like financial advisors is one of them. Realtors is another, brokers are another, where they see investors doing this type of work on a constant basis, but it doesn't seem to occur to them, or they don't want to take the leap themselves. You'd think they would start adopting some of the money-making things that they see their clients doing. Does that make sense? Why do you think that's the case? You just don't see it.
I started as a financial advisor with American Express Financial Advisors and went through their training program. For me, this is part of my story. You are trained, really, you're trained to be a glorified life insurance salesperson, to be honest. But you're trained in the financial planning world and selling insurance products, but also mutual funds. Part of that training is brainwashing that anything alternative is risky, speculative, and likely a sham and fraudulent. So you're preaching it to your clients. And I distinctly recall someone coming along with some sort of LP investment interest in real estate and me advising them as a brilliant and very wise 24-year-old, wise in the ways of all things investments, that this could be a scam and fraudulent. So I think that's part of it. It's not knowing, it's not understanding. You're not exposed to it. So you're afraid of what you don't know. I think that is a healthy part of it. Realtors is a more curious one. You know, realtors, especially the ones who have clients who are rehabbing, looking for investment properties to rehab. Those real estate those agents that shy away from it, maybe it's fear. I don't know. Maybe it's just being preoccupied and busy with listings. But you raise a really good point. It's all right there in front of you. The
Mhm.
risk reward profiles it's not even close. I tell people that all the time, and I'm not trying to beat up the stock market. I have some money in it. I believe in diversification, and I think the market's part of it. But at the end of the day, it's a casino if you're trading stock. I mean, and what scares me and alarms me are the people that are trading. If you're buying long term, it's in your 401k, you're kind of forced to do it anyway. If you're dollar cost averaging, what you're doing inside of your 401k, yeah, that all makes sense. The guys that are actively trading in and out of stocks, Apple, and although I argue Tesla's a pretty good trade today. If you're in and out playing that game, you're not winning. You're losing. You're busy, so you feel like you're winning, but you're not. The stock market historically is returning 7.8% over any measurable long period, not in a short period, any long period. Jack, I'm pretty sure you're doing that in real estate.
Yeah.
Without the fluctuations and the values, right?
And with the additional benefits that real estate offers.
Yeah. So for me, it's just, it was always a no brainer. Once I was enlightened by it, it became a no brainer. I became very disinterested. And my enlightenment, by the way, came from one day just having a conversation after playing golf with a friend of mine who was sat next to me at Prudential Securities. Left American Express, went to Prudential. And we were kind of just shooting the shit about who are the wealthiest people we know, not Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, like people we know.
Mhm.
And they were all in real estate. Every single one. The wealthiest people we knew who lived the cushiest lives were all in real estate, different factions of real estate. One was a developer for me. One bought multifamily and managed it, but all of them real estate. And it was kind of like, what are we doing here? We're playing the same game everybody else is playing. And, I'm a big fan of, there's a saying, if you want to beat Tiger Woods at something you can, just don't play him in golf.
Hmm.
That's what we're doing in the stock market. Are we really going to be better than Warren Buffett at picking stock portfolio? It's just, no. He's the Tiger Woods, but we can become somebody in real estate because we get to control our own domain. Right. So that for me was very eye-opening, and my life just took a different path after that. Selling radio was a means to get into real estate at that point.
Well, at the time too, there's this level of hustle at that age. It sounds like you were doing the radio sales, you were
Mhm.
bartending. There's a level of energy that you have to spend at that time. You're willing to do what it takes to find your way somewhere.
Yep, I was. And I think that was just, didn't realize it at the time, but I had an entrepreneurial spirit and drive. And I still do. I'm a deal junkie and I love deals and I love, where I am in real estate. One of my downfalls, if you ask me, what's your kryptonite? For me, it's shiny objects. It's the next deal. Because I'm like, oh, what's that? I want to make everything a deal. And you have to learn to restrain yourself and understand everything isn't a deal. That drive is still there. I think my kids absorb most of the energy at this point. But early on, yeah, I had that drive. And I can't say enough about folks like yourself who are putting this content and information out there for the 24 and 25-year-old Joe Downs of the world out there, because you're just accelerating that growth. And in my opinion, you're probably fueling the drive. I'm driving around on weekends looking for real estate, but I'm not doing it listening to you, putting ideas in my head and driving me, giving me that excitement to go look at one more house, to get that next deal. It was all internal. I mean, with people like yourself putting this great content out there, it's just, that's a different level that we didn't have back then.
Yeah, well, YouTube University wasn't even a thing,
Yeah.
right? The amount of
Radio.
information that's available now is just shocking.
Yeah. We live in the information world. Amazing. Now it's, now the game is you can get whatever information you want for
Mhm.
free everywhere. Now the trick is it good information? Where's the wisdom coming from? That's what you're providing on these podcasts. You can Google anything. I can read a book, but to be able to listen to, you said you've had 500 guests on. I mean,
Yeah, I'm closing in on 700 episodes.
that's a lot of wisdom that you've put out into the universe.
Yeah, it's just crazy the amount the guests, including yourself, like willing to come on the show and share their experiences and information.
On your average, it's nice you can say.
One of the things I would say we might have been around roughly the same age. I was also selling radio advertising.
No way.
Oh, yeah, and it was one of the talking about a slog of a job. To sell
Oh,
radio
God.
advertising was a tough one.
Remember the movie City Slickers, Billy Crystal?
Yep, yep.
I sell air.
The top 40
Okay.
radio station.
That was
And
probably more,
then
that was probably more fun. I was selling, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity.
well, you definitely would know your client base. You
Yeah.
know, it was an experience I wouldn't trade. I mean, there was a lot of sales, that initial sales training, and some of that stuff I still use today.
Yeah.
So
Well,
you,
here
through
you are.
that job, you found this one of your clients ended up being one of these companies that would come in and teach people how to flip homes on the weekends.
They would host two events that they used to write the copy for the ads. So I could probably tell you exactly what it was, but it was Tuesday and Wednesday nights at a hotel once a month. And they would get roughly 100 people there each night. And their goal was to sell 20 mentorships for $5,000. And I remember like, that was a lot of money, right? I mean, now a decent mentorship program into something is probably, 30, 40, 50 grand, right? These guys are selling it for $5,000. But I mean, worth it, right? I mean, I made it back and I made money doing it. And it got me into the game. It got me into real estate. And that's what I wanted. I'm sure it helped a lot of people. Company was called Real Estate Riches. I don't think they're still around, but
but one of those things that I always find fascinating is you went through this, you decided to give it a try. At what point did you realize, oh crap, this actually works?
well, I knew it worked going into it because I don't think I went through their mentorship for probably 6 months after they were my clients. I would go to every event. So I was now hanging out we would go to dinner after the seminar. And so they would have their inner circle of successful students. The evidence that it worked was in front of me. It was just a question of me coming up with the $5,000. Because as I mentioned, I lost money in the bar. So I lost like $100,000. So I was broke when I started selling radio. So I was really reinventing right down from like, I was still paycheck to paycheck, that type of thing. So once I started to build up my book of business in radio sales, I started to get some cash to be able to pay for the
Sure.
mentorship. Yeah.
The reason I ask is because I went and you presented all of this information and concepts. When I was going through stuff like that, it was like when we got that first property under contract, it was a light bulb moment that the next one came faster, and then the next one came a little faster. And I think most of the change actually happened with us dealing with the realization that this is actually possible. We started to become true believers at that point.
Yeah. Your confidence built because you actually did it now. You did it
Right.
and you survived it. And it wasn't that hard at the end of the day. Not to say we didn't need the mentorship or I'm not sure how you got involved, but I had that same feeling. We teach people how to buy storage facilities. In fact, I'm part of there's a gentleman that taught me how, Scott Myers, has a self-storage investing network. And he teaches, once a quarter, we have academies. I actually teach at the academies. And 5 years ago, I was sitting in the seats as a student, almost like I was, 20 something years ago with Real Estate Riches. And Jack was the same feeling. It was like this, oh my God, how are we going to buy one storage facility? Just one, right? This just seemed like a daunting task because I probably had forgotten that same feeling from just buying one single family property, which seemed like a daunting task, right?
Right.
And it's that first one that you get through that first one, you're like, this wasn't, look, we're still here. We're alive. We survived. It's not that hard. And I mean, it's hard to find them, but it wasn't hard to go through the process of evaluating and underwriting because we had mentors. We knew what we were doing. We kind of had Big Brother on our shoulder. And, I got to tell you, when I stand on the stage now and I look into the eyeballs of the people sitting in the seats in front of me, I remember vividly what's going through their head. Like, is this real? Is this even possible? Is this a scam?
You're right.
Just
Right.
trying to take my money. And next month we're closing on our 20th. And if you had told me 5 years ago I'd be closing on my 20th in 5 years,
Right.
one just seemed like climbing Mount Everest. These are the doubts and fears we have in our own head.
Mhm. Yeah, and if you're looking to get into storage units, I'm gonna direct everybody to your site again. It's bellrosegroup.com. That's grp.com. I'm gonna have that as a link in the show notes. If you found some value in what we're talking about so far, do us a quick favor, share this with one of your investor friends. If you're watching us on YouTube, give us a quick like and subscribe. One of the things I was gonna ask you, Joe, is the process there. You were starting in single family homes. Did you just like you were flipping them? Were you holding them as rentals? What caused you to take a serious look at storage units?
Well, I started wholesaling them. It was broke. So I got enough money to pay the 5 grand for the mentorship and then just got to work and it was just all sweat equity from there. Got some properties under contract and started wholesaling them. Then I think we flipped a few before we started renting. And then I got into some rentals where we were doing it in like West Philly. It just wasn't, we weren't set up to really run a rental business like that. So I ended up selling them. And then I got busy actually with commercial real estate and raising money for the 1031 exchanges. So I was traveling a lot at that point. When I went over to the 1031 exchange syndicator, I was in California like twice a month. So I was constantly on the road. So I just didn't have time for the single family residential. Did a flip here and there, but that was just kind of a side gig. When the markets crashed in 2008, 9, the syndication business was over. The 1031 exchange business was done. I was reinventing again. I went to a tax lien seminar in Philly, met a guy who became a partner of mine through a mutual friend who bought a reperforming second mortgage. This was the path I ended up on. We realized quickly that we could start buying. I had just raised 90 some $1 million at 6.5% return for 1031 exchanges, which is pretty good for 1031 exchanges. Here we were looking at buying reperforming second mortgages on homes, residential second mortgages for 25% yields. How's this even possible? And what I came to learn was that there's this entire little niche in the business where banks were selling off charged off defaulted second mortgages for pennies on the dollar. And all you had to do was get them reperforming. So I was buying them from kind of a middleman who got them reperforming and selling them to us. So my point was, partner, if they're selling us a 25% yield, what is their yield? It's gotta be 50 to 100. So we took a deeper dive and just started with our own money and bought some charged off defaulted second mortgages and figured out that business, and then just grew and grew and grew. And we built a business over time. I've been doing that for 15 years and I still have that company. In fact, we're in the middle of closing on a trade right now from a bank. We're buying about 120 million of charged off debt. And in that time, as I was saying, we started building the business, but then even that business had a cycle where the CFPB created these regulations, which made it just too onerous for the banks to sell the debt for a period of like 3 years. We were almost out of business because we couldn't buy anything. It was in that period I had to reinvent again. And I got an email from this guy, Scott Myers, who I don't know, about self-storage, which, Jack, I knew nothing about. I couldn't tell you how many, between commercial real estate syndications and the distressed debt company that we built, and we were, buying and selling these distressed loans. We had a downline of buyers. So I must have been at Vegas and conferences, just Vegas alone, by this point, 20 times in like 5, 6 years. Just every conference was Vegas, Vegas, Vegas. Nowhere in my travels did I ever see, meet, or hear of someone talking about self storage. I guess I drove by them. I'm 51 years old. We probably are around the same age. I've never rented a storage unit. I've never needed one. I still don't. I have a house with an attic, a garage, and a basement. I feel like if you need self storage, you probably are hoarding too much stuff. Don't tell that to people because we love you as customers, but
Right.
personally, I'm just not a self storage customer. So it was a completely foreign concept to me. And I get this email about investing in real estate with no toilets, tenants, or trash. And it caught my attention because I love real estate and this was interesting. It was a marketing email. Tenants are the lifeblood of self storage, and sometimes they leave trash behind. So it wasn't really true. There's no toilets. What caught my attention after being in distressed debt, and in particular, second mortgages, was what followed in the email. In the second mortgage, it's so esoteric. It's such a dislocated, fragmented market. It still is today that we kind of control and clean up. We're one of the largest buyers of distressed debt in the country at this point, which is to say we're like a big fish in the world's smallest pond. But the point is the information out there is so fragmented and dislocated. There's a lot of opportunity in that market. It's not even first mortgages trade at such a tight value band. Second mortgages, we don't have a lot of competition. There's not a lot of people to do what we do. In the email about self-storage, it wasn't the headline that caught my attention. What I found intriguing was what followed. And what followed was that at the time, 80% of all self-storage facilities were owned by mom and pop self-storage owners. And I thought, whoa, that's interesting. I would have assumed, after reading a little bit about it, that Public, CubeSmart, and Extra Space owned 90% of self-storage. I would have thought it would have been completely reversed. I was wrong. And it was that got me really intrigued in self-storage, because with mom and pop comes fragmented, dislocated information. And I continued to read on. I bought their course. I was like, I want to learn about this, so let's buy it. So I bought it was kind of, I know Scott because I teach at his academy now, but I'd make fun of him today. I'm like, dude, it was like 2016 and you're sending me a binder, which is fine because I read it, with DVDs. I was on a laptop that didn't even take DVDs. I was like, come on, man, you gotta step this up. But I read through it and everything I read confirmed my suspicion. It was a completely dislocated, fragmented world. Mom and pop owners are the pioneers, whether they built them or bought them 20, 30 years ago, good on them. But from a technology standpoint, from understanding how the REITs are operating and how we can do that today, and they just weren't there. I mean, maybe 5-10% of them are, but 90% of the mom and pops they're kind of managing the way they've always been managing. They just have a different way of looking at self-storage. I think for them, it was a hobby, and it's not. It's a business. It's a business that you operate inside of real estate, which there's so many advantages. In fact, there's so many advantages to get started in self-storage. If you're a single family flipper or renter person, that normal progress or life cycle of real estate, you start out with wholesale, single family, maybe you're flipping, and there's that natural graduation process to what, right? If you're in single family, it's duplexes and triplexes and fourplex, and then you go commercial, 10 units, 20. There's nothing wrong with all that. But you're always working in the investment world. And self-storage is interesting because it's a business. And why does that matter? Well, 80% of it's the same. Let's say if I'm comparing multifamily to storage. But a key difference is we can use, from a financing perspective, when you're getting started, you can use the SBA because it's a business, which means you can get 90% financing on a self-storage facility. So if I want to buy a $500,000 multifamily property, I probably have to put 25% down, right? So that's, 125 grand that I need cash to put down, plus closing costs. A $500,000 self-storage facility, I can get away with 50,000 down plus closing costs. It's a big difference,
Mhm.
right? In terms of how can I get into this business versus that business? There's a number of other advantages. If you're a multifamily guy out there, I'm not beating you up. I love multifamily, invest in multifamily. I just don't want to operate it. I love operating self-storage. And there's a number of differences between self-storage and other real estate asset classes. That's how I got into it. It was an email. I was curious. I'm a curious person. I opened the email and it got me reading and it got me thinking. And then I bought the course and then I went to his academy. And then it was just a matter of timing from there. And then actually Trump was elected. The CFPB became pretty, well, they lost a lot of their power. And then now, today I don't even think it exists anymore. So the banks opened up, started selling again. So we were able to do a trade that put us back into business and now we had cash. And I told my partner, I said, this is the next thing. We've got to build a business because buying distressed debt isn't a business. We can't control it. It's a hobby. The nice, very lucrative, love the hobby, but it's a hobby. Whereas self-storage, we get to control. We get to control, I can't make you sell me your facility, but one of the reasons it's a great business today to get into is most of the mom and pop facilities are owned by people 65 years and older. They're retiring. Life happens to people in their 60s and 70s and 80s. And so these facilities become available. But for the most part, people just are retiring.
Mm-hmm.
They've got these great assets in their businesses. And it's phenomenal to step in and be able to buy them and take them over and grow them and grow the value of them.
You mentioned that before we actually hit record that you buy properties and add value to. Could you talk to what are those things that mom and pop's not doing that you are low hanging fruit that you can implement like right away?
Yeah, it's easy to answer, but it's hard to see. So Jack, if you buy a multifamily property, you're going to add value to it. You might be changing out from countertops to granite,
Mm-hmm.
painting, redoing it, maybe adding a community pool or something like that. Very visual what you're doing, very understandable for most people. If we're doing physical things in self-storage, it's not that it's not visible. It's not sexy. We're adding security cameras, more lighting, bollards on the corners so you don't run into buildings, maybe regraveling if there's areas that are light and gravel, fencing, stuff like that. That does add value. And over time, it adds to the bottom line because we're probably attracting and retaining more customers with more safety, security, and whatever access. But the real value we're adding, the measurable financial value, comes from the management. So it's more stuff you can't see. So for instance, when I take over a facility or when I'm negotiating a facility, there's a number of key phrases I'm looking for from the seller. Things like our customers love us. We're the lowest rates in town. We haven't raised rates in years. That's like dollar signs, right? And especially when you're evaluating the market, you're saying like, oh, so the facility I'm buying is at $80 for a 10 by 10. The rest of the market's at 100. All I have to do is bring that up to 100 over time on the in-place tenants, on the in-place rents, the existing tenants. Doesn't mean I do it day one, but I know I can get to 100 even if the market stays at 100. So there's 20% I'm able to increase the value right there. Then what you'll find is he and his family, she and his family, the couple, whatever, there's always 5 or so units that they're using. So there's 5 units that are not generating revenue. There's always a church involved that has 3 units. Then there's always 5 to 10 at least that are not in circulation for rent. They're not available. They're marked in the system not available because they just haven't bought or gotten around to fixing the springs on the doors or new doors or whatever. So they just haven't gotten around to fixing them yet, right? So there's, starts to add up, right? Then there's always 5 to 10 units of customers who have been with them for years, but they haven't paid the rent in 6 months to 2 years. But don't worry, they're good for it. So you add that up, there's another 10, 15, 20 units that aren't even in circulation, right? And that's a lot of money right there. Then how do I find your facility? Do you have a website? Is it functional? I mean, some of the websites we see are horrible. There's no SEO traffic. Can I even find you on Google? You know how people find facilities today? It used to be you drive by. Traffic was everything. No, it's traffic's important because it's, I drive by it, I see it, I know it's there. So it's maybe the first one I think of if it's near my house. But that's not how we find them today. We pick up our phone and we go, storage near me. Right. And then are we calling? You and I would probably call.
Mhm.
And we have all the stats on generational. So 10% of our generation uses storage, 30% of millennials do, 50% of Gen Z expects to. So it's growing by leaps and bounds, just making it part of our everyday life where
Mhm.
it isn't for you and I. You and I also grew up with phones on the wall with long cords attached to them and no cell
Right.
phones. Our kids did not. Our kids don't know life without cell phones, right?
Mhm.
Millennials and Gen Z don't know life without storage. Most or a lot of them. You and I don't know life with storage. So there's that factor. But you and I would probably pick up the phone and call. Is the facility answering the phone? Probably not. Sometimes it goes to their home phone or their cell phone, and they're with the customer, or they're playing golf, or they're in their RV, or they're fishing because it's a hobby, not a business. We have call centers. We don't miss calls. That's if we call. What we do, the classic example that I tell investors, we buy a lot of these with investors that invest with us as partners. When I explain what we do to them, it's say, if I'm buying, Jack Hoss's storage, if Jack has a website, it's a website that tells me maybe his rates that never change are on it and the phone number, and that's it. When we take over, you're going to be able to find it from your cell phone, rent a unit from your cell phone, pay for that unit. In fact, we require you to put a credit card down or a debit card. So it goes right on auto pay, right? And you're insuring it, which is another revenue stream, all from your cell phone. That's the future of storage, and then you'll get an email with access code to the facility and then what unit you are. And you go in and, you bring your own lock anyway, because we could sell you a lock, but we don't have access to your storage unit. We don't take bailment of your possessions. We just provide a place for you to store them. So it's your lock. In the future, when they're building them now, there's no locks. Everything's Bluetooth. Well, it's all magnet, right? It's your door is magnetized. So your phone will unlock your door. Doesn't make sense to retrofit because it costs too much. But when we're building today, new ones, everything is on your cell phone. That's
Mhm.
that's future storage. So it's really fascinating, unique that way. That's a lot of the value that we're adding is, or said differently, I'm taking a facility from mom and pop managed and run to institutional quality. In other words, when I go to sell this thing in 5 years, if there's an institutional buyer, which is my primary target per buyer, it's turnkey for them. If they want to replace the management company, they just replace the management company. But everything is also, we're probably even using the same software they are, right? Whereas there might not have been a software in use from the seller. And I've walked into facilities where they keep track of the facility in a notebook. Some use Excel. One guy had a whiteboard with magic marker. He had all the units drawn, he had the facility drawn and units like almost to the size. And everything was a green, $100 was they paid the rent. Red 100 was they owe 100, but they haven't paid. And
Mhm.
that was his management system. And I guess he hoped nobody accidentally wiped up against it and erased all the information. It's really old school mom and pop type style management. And we're taking it into the 21st century with digital, everything's digitized and ready for the institutional buyer to just turnkey come in there and manage that thing.
Well, that's just really fascinating. I don't think anybody really expects to have that level of value add. I mean, it's just storage, 4 walls and a
Right.
garage door.
Not
Like,
anymore. It's a business and Wall Street's paying attention. And they're paying attention because back in 2008, 9, 10, what was the single best performing commercial real estate asset class was storage. Everything else was down 20 and 30%. Storage was like down 4 maybe, or I think across the board just didn't lose value. And in the last downturn, well, COVID was the best and worst thing that ever happened to self-storage. So COVID, multifamily stories. My wife and I did a single family rental still then. It was her first house. She wouldn't let me get rid of it. I was debating my existence, but even we experienced that. They stopped paying the rent and there's nothing you could do about it.
Mhm.
Storage, we went to damn near 100% occupancy everywhere. It was deemed an essential business. Our occupancies and rates went through the roof. And I say it was the best and worst thing that happened because those years were great, but everything that followed was just nosedived because
Mhm.
people went back to work and they took their stuff out of storage. The real estate market froze. The interest rates went up 400%. You couldn't finance anything. People weren't moving. So the last 2 years, the residential real estate market values didn't plummet, but transactions did. Right? Ask any realtor if they were and how their
Mhm.
business was the last 2 years. Weren't moving, then there less people were using storage. So that really hurt our business. Another reason why now is the single greatest time to buy self-storage and get into the business because we buy it, I'm sure, like any other commercial real estate asset, you buy it based on the trailing 12 numbers, right? The trailing 12 performance. Well, everyone's trailing 12 is terrible. So storage is on sale right now and the economy's ticking back up. Rates are starting to come down. Real estate transactions are ticking up. I don't know. We'll see what the national numbers are, but I know I'm playing golf later today with a buddy of mine who's an agent. He just picked up 13 listings in 14 days. It's unheard of.
Mhm.
So you're seeing the market, the economy come back. I know there's mixed signals on that, especially with the tariffs, but certainly the real estate transactions are ticking back up. So we're buying last year's numbers, heading into next year's growth. If you're looking to go from residential to commercial or just into real estate in general, there's never been a better time than self-storage. And it's 20 years ago, I don't know if I would have been able to, well, I don't think anyone was teaching people how to buy self-storage 20 years ago, but they are today. But it's a phenomenal time to get into the business.
Well, this has just been such a fantastic conversation. We're probably at time here. We're going to have to wrap up this episode. It sounds like you redefined yourself a number of times along the way.
Had to.
What what kept you going? Some people would have given up and just resigned themselves to a
I don't know. I honestly don't. I think I just, once I got a taste of being my own, even in failure, owning the bar and restaurant, I got a taste of being my own boss. And I went back to sales at the radio station, which was owned by CBS Radio. So that was another Fortune 500 company that I ended up working for again. But I didn't like, it was sales. So I controlled my own destiny a little bit, but I didn't like working for the man, if you will. Not that I'm like this, some anti, whatever. I think there was a realization that you're an entrepreneur. You can make your own way. You can eat what you kill. I don't ever want to be trapped in working for someone else. I have been unemployable for over 20 years. If some company hired me, they would regret it because I don't want to conform to any of the bureaucracy. I say what's on my mind, not rudely or disrespectfully, but I don't buy into the nonsense you hear from corporate America. I have to listen to my wife a lot, who works for pharmaceutical companies. I listen to her calls sometimes and I'm dying from the inside listening to them. I don't know how she does it. So yes, I had to reinvent multiple times. I don't think I'd change a thing. And I hope I don't have to reinvent myself with storage. I don't think I will. They threw a pandemic at us and that was actually a really good thing. We survived after the pandemic. So I'm sure we're going to continue to survive. Who knows if they outlaw self-storage, I'll figure out another way. That's the other thing. I feel so empowered, even being in self-storage, being an owner operator. I could move, I could learn multi-family again. I could learn mobile home parks and be just as happy doing that, I think. Just because I know enough to know I can survive in any business now, just because I'm in commercial real estate and storage in particular, because it's a business as well. I hope that I say all that humbly. I hope I don't come across sounding arrogant, egotistical, or anything like that. That is not why I'm saying what I'm saying. I'm saying what I'm saying to hopefully empower anybody listening that you could do this. I'm not Elon Musk. I'm not that smart. Anyone can do this if you just commit yourself to it and absorb it and learn any aspect of real estate and get in it and make mistakes, learn from the mistakes though, but just jump in the game, keep listening to Jack and his 500, 700 guests or how many there are, because storage may not be for you, right? It's not for everybody, but I'm sure you're going to have a guest on or have had guests on talking about subjects that just the light bulb goes off for somebody, and just go for it. Find someone who knows what they're doing and go for it. Don't get stuck in your 9 to 5 job. I'm telling you, if I can do it, and the people in my mastermind, none of us are Elon Musk, right? Maybe some people are smarter, I don't know, but nobody's launching rockets and catching them back from space. This is all attainable stuff. And I hope your audience just gets fired up and goes out and does something about changing their life, because they can in the alternative space, and they certainly can in real estate. And I'm here living proof they can in self-storage.
Well, this was fantastic, Joe. Again, it's Joe Downs. You could learn more at bellrosegroup.com. That's going to be a clickable link in the show notes. That's bellrosegrp.com. But if you're ready, Joe, we'll jump into the rapid fire questions.
Well, you made me do most of the talking. I'd love to know.
Well, that's part of what I'm supposed to do, right?
Well, I'll tell you this. If there's anything we did miss, feel free to contact me. Email me at joe@bellroseam.com. That's BELROSE, A as an asset, M as a management.com. And I'm happy to point you in the right direction or answer your questions. Or if you're interested in investing, whether it's passive or getting involved and finding a self-storage facility for yourself, happy to help.
Well, if you're ready, Joe, we'll jump into the rapid fire questions and close out this one.
Love it.
What lie do real estate investors often tell themselves?
That it's a deal because they found it.
Yeah.
They fall in love, and because they found it, when you stress test it every which way till Sunday and it still survives, then it's a deal. If it's a deal because if you tweak some numbers in your Excel pro forma, it's not a deal.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Get started in self-storage sooner. Like 20 years ago sooner. I wish this podcast was around, and I wish Scott Myers was teaching it then.
Do you have a book recommendation?
I'm going to recommend what I'm reading right now, because I wish I read this book as soon as it came out. It's The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham. It is phenomenal. I'm feeling elated reading it. I'm feeling stupid reading it. I'm feeling like, why didn't I read this sooner? The mistakes that I've made that could have been avoided if I had read this book. I don't get upset about the mistakes unless you repeat them. I'm a big fan of you're either winning or learning. You're not losing. You're only losing if you didn't learn. But you don't have to lose. And that's what mentors are for, and books like this. I'd love to avoid them. Love to learn from somebody else. The Road Less Stupid is a phenomenal book for any business. It doesn't matter if you're in business or real estate or whatever. It's a fantastic book.
And finally, what single strategy or tool have you implemented that has had the biggest time-saving impact to you or your business?
The book I read that led me to go to coaching. So the book is Who Not How by Dan Sullivan, who also has a coaching program called The Strategic Coach. And it is within that book and this program that I have learned about unique abilities, and that we all have them, and that we are more effective and more efficient in life and in business if we stay in our lane and not delegate, but hire or outsource what we are not good at. Because if we are not good at it, we probably don't like it. Right? If we don't like it, we're definitely not good at it.
Want to be good at it.
We don't want to be. Case in point, and this is a stupid example, but how long would it take you or I to build a website? And would it be good when we're done? We would be wasting our time. It would take us hours upon hours, but the information's out there. We could probably learn how to do it. But that's not my unique ability, and it's not what I'm good at. I'm good at talking to people, making relationships, making deals. You don't want me creating pro formas and spreadsheets. I can do it. You don't want me doing it. I'm better off partnering with someone, or whether it's hiring or partnering or outsourcing. It's better to do that. It's better to invest in that. It's not an expense, and it's an investment. And then reinvest my time, which is worth a lot more to me, doing things I'm good at than things I'm not good at or don't know how to do or have to learn how to do. So it's been that philosophy change, because it feels like an expense, but it's not. It's an investment.
Yeah.
And then you reinvest your time back into what you're good at, and that's the better investment.
Yeah, that's actually a mindset that's really hard to shake. Joe, this was absolutely fantastic. I really appreciate the value you brought to the show. Bellrosegroup.com, bellrosegroup.com. That's going to be a clickable link in the show notes. But hope you'll consider coming back again sometime. It was great meeting you.
Jack, I'm so thrilled you had me on. I appreciate it. I would love to be back.